be attributed to that other V word, value, right? Some of the things that we come to an understanding of meaningless can be based off of value, right? Like meaninglessness or vanity can be also attributed to value or the lack thereof, right? And that's something that we should think of too, right? Or what is a good example of that? Let's think of currencies, right? When we look at countries or nations or empires that no longer exist, unless their currency was on a precious metal, if I tried to go to the store and make a purchase with some money from some paper money from a nation that doesn't exist anymore, what will the store say? This is meaningless. This has no value. It may have had a value at some time, but it doesn't have a continued value, right? And that's what we're looking at today. These sort of things that we're teaching and preaching and looking at verbatim have a value in their set time. But over the course of humanity, over the course of you and my life, what value do they continue to have? That's what Solomon is going to keep reiterating over and over again, right? What value overall do things have? Momentarily, you can attribute a value to something, an action, a word, thought, or deed. But over the span of your life, is there value there, right? Do you see a value of those things, right? Now, the older you get, the less value you start to see in some of the things that obsessed your time earlier, because you keep realizing that as life keeps going on, so do you. That's one of the things that people don't touch on much. It's very difficult to change who you are for the positive, right? That's very difficult. Hebrews touches on this. Very difficult for somebody to go from left to go right. Jesus touches on this with the pathways, right? But people do change over the course of their life. Some people don't like spicy food, then they like spicy food. Some people don't like waking up early, then they like waking up early, right? Some people don't like staying up late, then they do like staying up late, right? There's things in life that starts to change over time just by the way that we live. So one thing also that Solomon is touching on as we get several weeks from now to chapter 12, you'll start to see this. Once he gets to analyzing life as an older person, he goes back to the beginning in chapter 12 and saying, because of the way life works in its trajectory, it's better for you to remember God when you're young. Because he's saying if you built a foundation of a relationship with God in your youth, chapter 12, when you got older and your physical nature started to deteriorate, you'd still be able to rely on the relationship that you have with God spiritually and emotionally. Right, that's the overarch of all 12 of these chapters, right? It starts in your beginning and then it ends in your beginning as well, right? It's basically saying like, here is a book, an ode to young and old people alike, right? Both. Whether you're young or old, young people, it's a warning, older people, it's a recap. When you get to chapter 12, both groups are in the same chapter. And it's basically saying, hey, if you have the opportunity as a young person, so it's going back to the beginning as a tutorial, you should remember God in your youth. Now, a couple of things in here in chapter 2, he touches on this, the verse where he says, everything is meaningless, everything is vanity. He goes through, he lives his life, he tries all these sinful things, but the thing that remains with him is wisdom, right? He just touches on it literally in one sentence in chapter 2. But that one sentence is the whole thesis of chapter 12. If as long as you start with a relationship of wisdom, even in the midst of sin, you would still have that wisdom with you. And that's what he's saying in chapter 12. And not only sin in chapter 12, but physical ailments, right? Life is going to progress for you physically. There's nothing that you can do to get around that. And his point is, if you have a good relationship with God in your youth, a good foundation, as you move on through life and these physicalities start to break down, you'll still have a strong relationship with God emotionally and spiritually. All right, the other aspect of this chapter that we want to start to look at, this is very good for self-help. We can teach Ecclesiastes as a holistic piece, as a self-help book. If you just did the audio of this book, just do audio, and you just started listening to chapters 1 and 2, you will start to notice there's several people online, YouTube specifically, that seem to touch on some of these same point. So a couple of things that I wrote down just before we start. This is really notes that I had from the last lesson 11, but I kind of held them because they're the conduit between both. Last lesson was the worthy women. This is the whole duty of man. Keep in mind this lesson 12, when we're talking about man, we're talking about the human race, mankind. All right. Ecclesiastes is touching on some of the same points that Proverbs 31 touched on, which is the difference between short-term and long-term characteristics, right? You have to analyze your own life. What are some of your short-term characteristics versus long-term characteristics? What does that mean? Well, I may be short-term in this state of my thinking, but do I attribute and hold on to that short-term state of thinking to long-term? Hopefully not, right? As a young person, right? All class today, we're going to keep talking about these two time constraints of young and old. As a young person, it's hard to fathom that concept of the difference between short-term and long-term, right? If you live long enough and your parents live long enough, your parents going to remind you of things that you said when you were young that you would never do, right? I would never listen to country music. I'll never eat sushi because that's raw fish. I'll never, all these nevers. And you were adamant about those things as a young person. Those people who are no longer young people can say, oh, there were so many things in my life I said that. And then I started to experience life, or someone exposed me to some aspect of life, and I didn't hold on to those dogmatic views, right? We have to think about that a little bigger than just views, likes and dislikes, but also characteristics. Are there things about your character that are now in the short term that you can alleviate the burden of dealing with in the long term? Church as a whole, right, as the kingdom, does a lot of talking, which is rightfully so, about specific sins. Today, I want to talk about characteristics, because I try to talk less about a specific sin and more of a characteristic, because a specific sin is quantifiable like this phone. I can see or touch stealing or killing someone, right? It's hard for me to touch on being rude or being aggressive or being violent. See, because that's internal, right? Yes, the aftermath of those things I can see and touch. Like the Sermon on the Mount said, if you hate somebody long enough, you can end up killing them. But how can I see the hate that's in my heart? Jesus was saying God sees those things. Solomon is touching on this in terms of vanity as well, because if you indulge in an aspect of life and you don't go through life with some sort of a strategic relationship with God and relinquish some of those internal struggles that you have, as your life gets older, Solomon is saying things internally will start to impact your external, right? Internal will impact your external. And then the reverse, he says, will happen. If you start and maintain a relationship with God internally, even if he's saying everyone will fall short and do these sinful things, but even if you went down a bad pathway, your internal moral compass will help reroute you back. Because his point was, especially in chapter 2, I had a plan to do certain things. I had a plan to go through and do what the world does. He said in one specific verse, my plan was to see just a couple of days, NIV says, not years. He's being facetious, but he's saying mankind just has a couple of days of their life. And he said, I wanted to see, what do people do with their days? And he said he went through all of these things, right? Folly and all these things, even heavy drinking, all these things he was doing that the everyday person does. His point was, the main problem with those things, put spiritual aside, is that they're not sustainable, right? I can't stay drunk. I can't stay high. I can't stay in a sense of euphoria, right? When I buy something, the buildup of saving for it, the thrill of going online looking for it, the click to add the cart, soon as you add the cart and pay, you already looking out the window waiting for the delivery. But when you get it, all those other emotions I just said, that's gone. Now you're onto a new emotion, right? Mothers and fathers can attribute to this, right? Yes, we're pregnant. The thrill of getting up to and then the child is born, how can you recreate that thrill? You see what we're saying? Like, people recognize this in life, but it doesn't change our behavior, right? Just the first time you did anything, purchase a home, moved out, went to school, bought something on your own, all these things are emotional, right? There's things inside of you that chemically react and you feel a way. But how can we maintain them? Again, spiritual to the side. His point is, even when I try to do the things that everyone is doing, they're fleeting. And fleeting is a way that we normally speak. His phrase is grasping after the wind, meaning like, how can you grab wind, right? Just try to grab in the air. It doesn't make any sense. His point is, that's how it is living life that way. When you just keep doing something every day, in this culture today, Ecclesiastes should be jumping on the page on you, because people do things because other people do. Yesterday, 2 days ago, I was watching this musician who was talking about when he first came out, people were criticizing him because they said he looked and sounded like another famous musician. And he said, well, I was just a kid when I started doing music, and everyone had tattoos, so I had tattoos. Everyone had bald head, so I had bald head. Everyone wore bandanas, so I wore bandanas. And his point was, even though he had individual talent, his outward display was impacted by his surroundings. That's the world we live in now, but to a greater extent because of social media. You have people who don't like doing certain things that do it because their whole timeline does it. One of those things that's hilarious to me always is drinking. You have people that literally don't like the taste of alcohol. Taste. And they do it because everyone else they know drinks. Well, isn't that strange? Well, to the world, no. Well, some people I say, hey, you like this taste? Some alcohol you smell and you already could taste it. You smell, smell like a shock through your body. And you see some people drink, and when they drink, what kind of face they make sometimes? Ooh. Ah. Some of them do just like that. Ah. And you think, hey, you gonna have another one of those? Yeah, I'll have another one. You like that? No, not particularly, but if I drink enough, then I'll start liking it. You have people who treat other people that way. Hey, you like this guy? No, but he's kind of nice to me and I'm lonely and go on some dates. And plus, after a couple of these nasty shots that I don't like either, not only will the shots taste better, he'll start looking better or she'll start looking better. People live their life that way where you say, do you even like this? You like these clothes? You like this hairstyle? There's meme all the time that talk about women cut their hair and then spend the next 12 months wishing they didn't cut their hair. Right? Like these are funny things because we live this way, right? Sometimes we make major life decisions, a purchase, something we say, oh, I always wanted this, and you get those shoes and they hurt your feet. But now you have to wear them. Why? There's no return policy. I paid money for these shoes. Now you walking around pigeon-toed because you made a commitment to something that you can't retract. Solomon is pointing this out in a very wide grasp so that we can look at ourselves and say, you know what, I can't lie. A lot of what he's saying, I'm living this way. But don't blame yourself is what I'm saying this morning. Look around. Some of what you do is because of what other people do. So when you look at this from the balance between short-term and long-term characteristics, the other two words that you should grab from this in your study is growth and trajectory, right? What trajectory do you see yourself on at life? We can't make any promises to what things will be except for Christ Jesus. But in my own personal life, I have to make some plans for myself, right? What plans do I have for me individually to get better? Do I have any? Do I have any plans to grow personally? Again, let's try to bring our minds away from physical right and wrong and think of emotional and spiritual, right? What are some things, the way you think, right? Some things you do that the Bible would categorize as a sin, you do that specific sin because of the way you think. See, I'm trying to pull us back internally. We spend a lot of time saying, oh, I'm sorry, I'll never do that again. I'm asking you to ask yourself, why do you do that? That's how you don't do it again. If you never analyze why you do something, sometimes the why you do something could be genetic. It could be learned behavior. It could be the way you're raised. It could be the people you hang out. See, so if you never analyze that, therapy teaches you that. You will continue to repeat a cycle. You know what way is that way? Finances. Being poor is a state of mind. It has nothing to do how much money you have. Poverty has nothing to do with your money, because you could have no money, but your mind is not poor. Ask people who are now successful that started out poor. They'll tell you, I never was poor. Somebody say, yeah, you were poor. Look, you didn't have any money. I never viewed myself that way. Some people, the way they dress, you don't know how much money they have. They might have no money. They may wash them clothes every day, but you think, oh, they look kind of better than me, because they don't view how they present themselves based off of how much money that they have in their pocket. But poverty is a mindset. That's how it's generational. You know what's also the mindset? Wealth. Wealth is a mindset. See, it's not about the amount of dollars that you have, because some people who are born into wealth, the dollars are abstract. It's not like their house has money in a vault that they can go see and count it. It's that their parents teach them as a kid, we're wealthy. But what does that mean, though? Right? Again, do they take the kid to the bank every Saturday and show them the money? No, they show them the effects of wealth so that the kid will grow up and think, I'm wealthy. That's the same thing that happens with poverty. Every day I'm showing you the effects of us not having, so you think and grow up to say, this is how my last name should live. If you don't believe me, go look at cultures that have caste systems. They tell you this is your fate. You have no way to break this cycle because your last name is this. And that is a mental imprisonment. See what I'm saying? Solomon is saying, is there a way to break out of that? Right? The meaningless, the vanity, is there a way to break out of mental imprisonment? Some of us are imprisoned in our minds, even though we're free through Christ Jesus. Here, your mind is in prison. You've come to accept your situation and who you are and how you think and how you live because of so many factors. I'm imploring you to say to yourself, what are those factors? What are the factors that got you to where you are here, positive and negative? Because the book is not all negative. He talks about positive too. That's why he keeps saying wisdom is sticking with me. Now, the other aspect between chapters 1 and 2, he touches on this in both chapters that I love, is he said, chasing after or having much wisdom, this responsibility is a burden. And his response to that is, because we speak like this, simple-minded, right? Old people used to say, you simple-minded. When you're simple-minded, you don't have a lot of burdens. What does that mean? Well, you're just a simple kind of person, right? You just yay or nay, what you want to eat, what you want to eat. Where you want to go, where you want to go. What you want to do, what you want to do. Right? It's simple. That means this, I don't have preferences. Not a bad thing, but you know, somebody has spicy food, I taste it. I like spicy food. I like eat bland food. I like bland food. I want to go to the beach. Oh, I have fun at the beach, right? They're not demanding. This is just personality thing. Some people's personality is that way. In a relationship, let's say that's your personality or the other person's personality, right? If it's the other person's personality, and I like things particularly, if you ask me how the relationship is going, I'm going to say, what? Great. Why? Because she do everything I want to do. So this worked out good for me, right? But when we're looking at that, we can see that in life. Let's take it a step further than likes and dislikes, right? And just think about how life works, the way you view sort of things. Wisdom is a responsibility because think of it from a spiritual sense. Once I know, right? Once King Agrippa knew, once the millions of people heard the 12 apostles preach and teach, 1 Corinthians is saying once people hear the message of the cross, people are divided into two categories. Either they think it's foolishness or they think it's power, because it's the hear the truth and the truth will set you free. That's why first you got to hear, believe, repent, confess, and be baptized. That's why Jesus kept saying what? He who has an ear, let him hear, right? Once you hear, now you have a responsibility to that which you heard. That's the whole point of the gospel. But without hearing the word, mankind had an excuse, because what could they tell God? I don't know what you're talking about. Where are you saying I should have did something left or right, up or down? So the word, 1 John 1:14 said, it became flesh. And the word showed us who God was. Oh, this how you want us to live? Now I have a burden of that responsibility. Solomon is saying, when you chase after or you observe wisdom and it becomes a part of your psyche, now you have a burden to do the right and wrong. That's why I say all the time, the people who remain faithful in any aspect of life, financially, physically, emotionally, or spiritually, it's harder for them. The people that try and give up instantaneously, it is not harder for them, and no one can convince me because the burden is on the wisdom. The people who go to the gym sporadically, it is not hard for them. They say, oh, it's so hard. No, it's not hard. The people that stop doing something and make a sacrifice, the people in the Olympics who have been making a sacrifice for the last 4 years, not for a guarantee, for a chance. How I'm going to tell them it's harder for me physically than them? What about the Paralympics when the people are disabled? How can I tell them it's harder to work out? Hey, you don't understand my metabolism. They're going to say, I don't even have a leg. What are you talking about? Oh, I got to be humble. Every time I see the Olympics, I'm humiliated. Ooh, look at these people's body. I can't even run down the stairs. The one thing I seen, the swimming was so long, the announcer said, we going to commercial break. And I'm thinking the whole time I was in commercial, I was eating. And the TV came back on, they were still swimming. I was thinking, well, when I swim, I just jump in the water. I jump back out. It's just for recreation. This looked like work. Look at what people can do with their body through what? Dedication. Because they stick to their craft. You think of these things spiritually as well. He's saying is, are you going to stick to your spiritual craft? Or are you going to chase after things that I, as the author, am already telling you in advance are pointless? Now, those people that can hear this, before they do some of this, believe it and say, you know what, because the Bible said it's meaningless, I'm not going to do it. You will be more blessed. The problem is those of us who heard this and either forgot it or didn't think it was true and did some of this anyway can testify and say, not only is this true, I wish I could go back and not do it. That is the negative effects of this type of life. I can tell you that some of these things he's speaking about, when you go down this pathway, like a path, like this thing here is a path, and you say, I'm going to step out of these chairs to this path, and I'm going to say everything that comes along this path, I'm going to not only do, he's saying I'm going to indulge it. That means even sometimes when your friends are like, we got to chill. You thinking what? No chill. Now, some of us may be thinking, I don't know what that means. Some of us thinking, oh, I know what that means. That means that some of the friends who turn you on to a certain thing, you surpass them. And they're like, hey, Alice, you gotta slow down, man. We was only doing this for a little fun. And I'm saying, no. I'm going to go to the extreme. That's what Solomon's saying. Again, some of us, I pray that's not you. But some of us who can testify to that can say, yes, in certain aspects of my life, that was me. His point is, even in that, he did that to see, is that the way, right? Do I get a better result in my life, this physical life? And he says, no, even when I indulge in whatever the thing is, I come out of it and think even the indulging was meaningless. The action was meaningless. The taking the detour was meaningless. The indulging was meaningless. Because then I woke up and I'm the same person. And his point was, even if I continue down that path, then I just die like animals die, he said. It's just the animals return to the dust and I return to the dust. And his point is, what was the purpose of that? What gain did I get for living a life of folly? He talks about work, living a life dedicated to work. He said what? Meaningless. In the NIV in chapter, I think 4, he says the guy wakes up and said, this is a meaningless business. He said the guy had no son and the guy had no next of kin, and he just was working and working and working. Chapter 2, it talks about what? Building up wealth. And he said what? Oh, what's the purpose? I built up wealth, and when I die, the people who didn't even toil for it will reap the benefit. Oh, we always talk about church about those that don't have. What about those in church who have? When you have and you give this said thing to someone else that didn't buy this, do they appreciate the same way? Always we talk about those that don't have. No, you don't appreciate because you don't know how much said thing costs. So when you get it, you think, what? Don't kids do that? Kids be stomping on toys, breaking toys. Would you be like, whoa, that thing costs $100, relax. But the kid is like, I'm a kid. I don't understand concept of money. See what we're saying? So his point is, think about if that wasn't a kid, but a life. What if you dedicated yourself to a life and you just gave a trust fund, gave a car, gave a house here, a free, and you thinking if somebody would have gave me said thing, I would have been a billionaire by now because I would have had a great start. I had to crawl my way. But do the people receive it that same way? No, church. They most likely look at it as, well, you give me once and don't let you give twice and 3 times. Now I'm expecting something. But you lived your life with what? Don't nobody owe me nothing in this world. See how the perspective is different because of life. So his point is, even that's meaningless. Even me trying to give a better start to the next generation is meaningless because if they don't receive it in the way it was intended, it won't benefit them. He's touching on all aspects of life. That's why I said, if you can, every week, one of the fastest ways to digest is audio. Just turn Ecclesiastes on audio. It'll take about 45 minutes to listen to all 12 chapters. If you can hear Ecclesiastes for the next 6 weeks straight, I guarantee you your mind will change. It'll either change for the better or it's going to change for the worse, because you either going to want to get tired of hearing him say meaningless and vanity, or you're going to start driving or listening in your headphones and analyzing your life. And you're going to start thinking to yourself, wait a minute, what am I doing? What am I doing? And even though you start experiencing that change, here's the thing about the Bible. If you took the headphones off and spoke to someone else who had not been listening to Ecclesiastes and tried to persuade them of the same change you have, do it normally work? No, right? It's like you eating something good and you telling me, oh, Ellis, that was good. Can I have some? Oh, I ate it. Well, I can describe it to you. Well, I'm trying to get a piece. You know, I can't experience the same. That's what he's saying about income and wealth and progression, right? We talked about this when we're talking about parenting. There's only so much a parent can do. Some of these kids nowadays, I don't want to hear their excuse. Kids nowadays have every excuse, 20, 30-year-old, everything. And I started looking, I'd be like, man, you had 2 parents. No, my parents was divorced. I said, yeah, but you had 2 people in your life. What about generation that only had 1 parent? You had 2 people. Any child that had 2 parents in their home, you are immensely more blessed. Go ask some people who have no parents. Oh, you don't understand. I don't want to understand sometimes. Some of this have to do with complaining. When you become an adult, regardless of what happened to you in your past, you have to grab hold of this. Solomon is saying is what? You have to be responsible for your own action. Your parents told you they weren't perfect. And if they told you they were perfect, they lied. So therefore you knew they weren't perfect. But how do you go out into the world? He touches on that in Ecclesiastes. He looks at it and said, listen, I'm the son of David. I can't keep blaming David, saying on why I am the way I am. Oh, my dad was a womanizer, so I'm a womanizer. No, his point was I was indulging on my own. I cannot blame my past. I can see that I was exposed to those things in my past, but the continuation of that behavior is on me. David is dead. That's what he's alluding to. So even in that aspect, even in family development, you can use Ecclesiastes because we can look at their family dynamic and say their last name was a mess. But Solomon had his own responsibility to right and wrong that he had to be a part of. All right, let's read chapter 1. I'm just going to read through this because I think it's important for us to at least hear these words. I'm going to read let me read NIV, only because I just feel like it's easier to digest. I would prefer to read New King James, but I read the New King James all the time. So let me just read NIV, right? So we do chapter 1. The words of the teacher, son of David, king of Jerusalem, right? If we had time, you can go back to 1 Kings and look at who Solomon was. He had asked God for wisdom. God said, because you asked for this and not other things, I'm going to give you more wisdom than everyone else and these other things. So that means he's the source of truth. This person had all the wisdom and all the money. In chapters 1 and 2, he's going to say, I had more wisdom than all the other kings in Jerusalem. I had more money than all the other kings in Jerusalem. People like that you need to listen to, right? Because they've lived life. Even on the negative, we also should stop doing this. I say this all the time in terms of parenting and children, right? If you know your parent made bad mistakes, you need to listen to them. Because you could say, well, they did a bad mistake. I should listen. Somebody outside in the street, I should listen to them because they're on the street. They may say, Ellis, don't do the things that I did that got me to here. Solomon is saying that. Solomon is saying, don't read this and be excited and say, oh, that's how I'm going to live. Ecclesiastes up till chapters 12 is saying, don't live like this, right? I need to preface that because some personalities like mine will hear some of this and be like, oh, this sounds like fun. All this meaningless stuff sound like, let me try to emulate this. All right, meaningless, or if you have New King James, vanity, says the teacher, utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless. What do people gain from all their labors at which they toil under the sun? Generations come and generations go, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises, the sun sets, hurries back to where it rises. The wind blows to the south, turns to the north, round and round it goes, ever returning on its course. All streams flow into the sea, yet the sea is never full. To the place the streams come from, there they return again. All things are wearisome. More than one can say. The eye never has enough of seeing, nor the ear is full of hearing. What has been will be again. What has been done will be done again. There's nothing new under the sun. Is there anything of which one can say, look, this is something new? It has already long ago. It was here before our time. No one remembers the former generations. Even those yet to come will not be remembered by those who follow them. I, the teacher, was king over Israel and Jerusalem. I applied my mind to study and to explore by wisdom all that is done under the heavens. What a heavy burden God has laid on mankind. I have seen all the things that are done under the sun. All of them are meaningless, a chasing after the wind. What is crooked cannot be straightened. What is lacking cannot be counted. I said to myself, look, I have increased in wisdom more than anyone who has ruled over Jerusalem before me. I have experienced much of wisdom and knowledge. Then I applied myself to the understanding of wisdom and also of madness and folly. But I learned that this too is a chasing after the wind. For with much wisdom comes much sorrow. The more knowledge, the more grief. Chapter 2, I said to myself, come now, I will test you with pleasures to find out what is good. But that also proved to be meaningless. Laughter, I said, is madness. And what does pleasure accomplish? I tried cheering myself with wine and embracing folly, my mind still guiding me with wisdom. I wanted to see what was good for people to do under the heavens during the few days of their lives. I undertook great projects. I built houses for myself. I planted vineyards. I made gardens and parks and planted all kinds of fruit trees in them. I made reservoirs of water, groves of flourishing trees. I bought male and female slaves and had other slaves who were even born in my house. I also owned more herds and flocks than anyone in Jerusalem before me. I amassed silver and gold for myself and the treasures of kings and provinces. I acquired male and female singers and a harem as well, the delights of a man's heart. I became greater by far than anyone in Jerusalem before me, and in all this, wisdom stayed with me. I denied myself nothing. My eyes desired, I refused my heart no pleasure. My heart took delight in all my labor, and this was the reward for all my toil. Yet when I surveyed all that my hands had done, and what I had toiled to achieve, everything was meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Nothing was gained under the sun. Then I turned my thoughts to consider wisdom. Now he's going to switch, and also madness and folly. What more can the king's successor do than that has already been done? I saw that wisdom is better than folly, just as light is better than darkness. The wise have eyes in their heads, while the fool walks in the darkness. But I came to realize that the same fate overtakes them both. Then I said to myself, the fate of the fool will overtake me also. What then do I gain by being wise? I said to myself, this too is meaningless. For the wise, like the fool, will not be long remembered. The days have already come, and when both have been forgotten, like the fool, the wise too must die. Right? Think of Jesus saying, it's appointed for man to die, and after that is judgment. So I hated life because the work that is done under the sun was grievous to me. Anybody who work long hours, anyone who have a career knows what this is, especially post-pandemic. All of it is meaningless, a chasing after the wind. All them hours you work, you get sick, you pass away, they'll mourn you for 2 seconds and replace you with somebody else. Facts. I hated all the things I had toiled for under the sun because I must leave them to the one who came after. And who knows whether that person will be wise or foolish, yet they will have control over all the fruit of my toil, into which I have poured my effort and skill under the sun. This too is meaningless. So my heart began to despair over all the toilsome labor under the sun. For a person may labor with wisdom, knowledge, and skill, and then they must leave all they own to another who has not toiled for it. This too is meaningless and a great misfortune. What do people get for all the toil and anguish striving with which they labor under the sun? All their days, their work is grief and pain. Even at night, their minds do not rest. This too is meaningless. Can't even sleep. A person can do nothing better than to eat and drink and find satisfaction in your own toil. This too, I see, is from the hand of God. What did Jesus say about being content? What did Paul say about being content? For without him, God, who can eat or find enjoyment? To the person who pleases himself, God gives wisdom, knowledge, and happiness. But to the sinner, he gives the task of gathering and storing up wealth to hand it over to the one who pleases God. What about the parable when Jesus was saying, hey, to the person that did a lot with a little, and this person that did nothing, give the nothing to the other person, right? Isn't that what this is saying? Analyze your life. To the person who pleases himself, God gives wisdom, knowledge, and happiness. But to the sinner, Wednesday night, we read a verse where Jesus said, but the first shall be last, and the last shall be first. Jesus said, the meek shall inherit the earth. All these things people chasing after, God is saying, I see you chasing after. I'm going to give it to you. Then I'm going to make you give it to someone else who's doing what I asked. This too is meaningless, a chasing after the wind. See, just those 2 chapters is how we structure ourselves in this society. Corporate America is set up just like how I was reading. Some of us who have careers in corporate America was cringing hearing this because you think to yourself, oh, that's my life. Is it worth it? Right? There is no reincarnation. There is no coming back. There is no do-over. Going through this life one time, the things that you're doing every day, you know how you should evaluate if you should continue doing them or not. You need to ask yourself every day you wake up, first thing, God, I woke up. Was yesterday worth it for today? Do I see a value in what I did or experienced yesterday that I can attribute to my day today? Right? Because today have enough troubles. So if what I did yesterday is not going to improve my today, I need to remove that from my mind. That's why I was saying Solomon had to remove the negative aspect of his upbringing from his mind, because if he kept thinking about that, all he would do is replicate that cycle, but he can't blame his dad. He'd have to blame himself. At some point, he had to wake up and say, wait, I am a womanizer because I'm a womanizer and I know better. I can't blame that because of things I've seen from my mom or my dad or the world around me. I have to come to the realization that, wait a minute. This is meaningless for Solomon. That's why you have to ask yourself today, especially if God lets you live till tomorrow and you get to your beginning of your work week or school. What is today? What is my plans? What am I going to do? Like, this, go here, there, eat this thing. Yeah. But what am I doing? See, the world don't ask themselves that. Church needs to ask themselves daily. What are we doing, church? You need to ask yourself when you leave here, what am I doing? What am I doing today? Right? My life today. What's today's date? Is the 15th of August. Well, praise God. Some people died on the 14th. But what am I doing today? And if you start thinking about what you're doing and do an inventory and you have a bucket of things that's not improving you as a person, you need to put them in the meaningless category. That may be a person, that may be a job, it may be a thing, it could be a pet, it could be a vehicle, it could be a frame of mind. Some of us may have to put our whole frame of mind in the meaningless column. Some of us say, I got to be honest, my frame of mind is meaningless. I get up, I look at social media so much, I'm late. Then when I'm at work, I'm still doing this. I talk to this person, I text this, I look at this, I watch this show, I go here, I go there, and at the end of the day, I go to sleep. And then what about the next day? I do the same thing. And what about 365? Same. What about a lifetime? Same. You know what I got to say? That mindset is meaningless because when you die and you go to the next life, there is no social media. And therefore, the things you do in this life dictate where you go in the next life. If it didn't, I would say, yes, keep doing it. The problem, though, is we got to go somewhere. So that frame of mind is meaningless. That's why I said I didn't want to spend any time today talking about a specific sin. Because for some of us, our blocker may be the whole way we think, not a specific action that we're doing. So you have to think to yourself, wait a minute. This stage in my life, is my mindset even meaningful? What is my mind? Yeah, I don't even know what I'm doing. Am I caught up in what this world is offering, or am I thinking about where I'm going? Because, newsflash, death come at any time. If it was guaranteed we would be old, I would live way different. Because I just will get to, if God said you're going to live to 100, great. I'll call you when I'm 90. I'll give you 10 good, I'm talking about strong Christian years. I'll be door knocking at 90. But from 1 to 89, leave me alone. But the reason why I got to live a certain way is today I may pass. And in that knowledge of knowing I could die at any minute, I think to myself, oh, wait. I can't be wasting no time on no meaningless stuff. I got to get myself right. That's why when you start talking about how you present yourself to the world, you have to attribute that value to what? God Almighty. You have to draw self-esteem from God because God made you in his image. God died on a cross for you. Don't let this world tear you down. Don't let people at work tear you down. Don't let relationships tear you down. Don't let your own frame of mind tear you down because you are the most important thing. Right? We said a couple of weeks ago, in the physical aspect of creation, women were the last thing created, the crown jewel of creation. From a spiritual standpoint, that's the church. You know why they say God, and you look at a mirror of God is the church, and a mirror of church is Mary. See how those things all work together? Notice how Jesus always talked to the church as what? His bride. Female attribute, personification. Yes, that's the crown jewel of God's creation was the kingdom. Jesus died for that. Don't let tomorrow take that from you. Don't let emails take that from you. Teams, Slack, Skype. Don't let them steal that. What? Work that if you didn't do and someone else did, the ball just keep rolling. All of us who have, let's talk about stressful jobs or you're in school, especially in school, group projects. Anybody that went to school and was in a group project, no, everyone do not give equal amount of effort and work. But when you went above and beyond and get an A, did the teacher say, let me see, you got an A, the rest of y'all got a D? No, the teacher gave A. Work is the same way. When you be hustling and bustling and you be moving and shaking and doing all that, and the whole team get recognized. Now, sometimes they give you bonus, but they lie to you because they do the bonus individually, right? And what they tell you, don't tell anyone else you got bonus. Well, one time at work, somebody said, and then you know what they found out that I already know is true? They all got the same bonus. But the manager was making it seem like, no, really, Ellis, you did good work, so shh, don't tell no one you got this dollar. Well, then one kid came out and said, hey, man, I only got that. And people said, oh, wait a minute, I got the same amount. Oh, they told me I was special. How special are you? No, they didn't give any special merit here. Sometimes they do, but they just said, give little crumbs to them. And just like mice, they'll keep running. If a mouse was there and I had some cheese here, I said, hey, come here. And I could just chase this mouse around this whole bill. Here, come here, mouse. come here. Eat some of this cheese. Don't never give it to them. But just the hope of getting it will exhaust them out. That's how we live. That's why people call it a rat race. Just this, running on the wheel. Sweating. Woo, I'm getting somewhere. And they give you just crumbs, little bonus, little car, little house, little watch. Woo, look at these things I have. Just to steal this. Just little car for this, little house. You give your whole mind away because somebody gave you enough money for a house here. We do the same thing in relationship. Ooh, ooh, little hug, little kiss, little good pleasure. Give your whole soul away to somebody. Somebody on demon time. Your whole soul here to somebody just because they like me a little bit. What? Huh? No, church. Leave today doing an emotional and spiritual inventory of yourself. And protect yourself. You cannot be accessible to everybody and everything because it will pull you away. Some people can do some sins and bounce right back. Some people can't. Some people just put their pinky in it and it pulls them away. You have to analyze that. That's what Solomon is saying. Solomon is saying these things pulled me away. That's where I was different from David. David and Solomon differed in a very critical area that impacts us in the church. David never left God. David would be the type to sin. He put it on social media. He come in here on Sunday. We all wondering why is David here? Then he sit here the whole time. The brother give the invitation. Here we go. David would have came up here, read this soliloquy poem, psalm that he wrote every Sunday. Solomon wouldn't be here some Sundays because Solomon would be chasing after fathers. We would have seen Solomon when he was gray. Then we say, hey man, where you been? Whew. This world is a waste of time. And you know what it said? Sweetheart. We've been saying that every Sunday. This world a waste of time. You wasted your life to figure out the world was a waste of time. That's one of the key differences of Solomon and David. Solomon allowed these things in the world to pull his heart away from God. David was doing sinful things, but constantly trying to get his heart back realigned with God. And that's where you have to do that inventory we're talking about today emotionally, because is your heart aligned with God? Again, today we're not spending time talking about physical sin, but is your heart aligned with God? You may fall short of God's glory and grace, but is your heart aligned with God? Or are you and God not speaking? Are you and God not on speaking terms? Those are things that you have to analyze. And in analyzing that, what are some ways starting today, if we don't live till tomorrow, that you can make some changes physically, emotionally, financially, and spiritually to realign your mind with your purpose? Because the last part of chapter 12 in Ecclesiastes in verse 13 says, let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. For God will bring every work into judgment, including every secret thing, whether it is good or whether it is evil. That is the key or the meaning of life. So if I know that the whole purpose of mankind is to do God's will, and that God will judge every work, whether the things I do outwardly or internally, now I have to leave class with that knowledge and say, how will I act towards that truth? Will I change anything about the way I think or my behavior, right? So these are the things we'll look at. Okay, this topic for the class is seeking wisdom, obviously. If you can, over the next several weeks, like I said, most likely this will take us till October because there's 25 questions. We purposely just wanted to do an intro here. So next week, we're going to dive into question 1, what specific view of the world is set forth in these verses. Each week, if you can, read the chapter of the week twice, if possible, but read the whole book at least once. And like I said, audio, if you're someone that's more visual or audio driven, just go online or one of the apps, listen to it audio. If you're struggling with New King James, NIV translation speaks more like modern vernacular. Like I said, it'll take you about 15 minutes. Only took us about less than 5 minutes to read chapter 1 and 2 this morning. But the more you hear these things, because the world won't teach you this, The more you hear about what is and is not meaningless, I guarantee you one of two things will happen. Either you will continue or you will increase. You'll either continue in the way you were thinking before, or you'll increase in your thinking of knowledge, wisdom, and truth, because this is God's inspiration trying to grab us from the fire. This world is in the fire right now. God trying to grab us out. So if we can dive into these things spiritually, I feel like we can grow. All right. Any comments or questions before we break? Anything that anyone would like to say before we dismiss and worship? All right. Thanks for everyone's attention and attendance. Hopefully a couple of things were said to shock you into your self-evaluation. For those who are on YouTube, we're going to disconnect our live stream now, and we're going to connect to our worship service in about 5 minutes or so. And the rest of us here